and we will get going. Thanks, everybody. I think this is week number 4 of our weekly Zoom meetings with Head Start programs all across Kentucky. Those of you that have participated with us in the past, I hope that you're finding value in these conversations and the information that's shared. So with that, I know we've got a few things we wanted to discuss today, or at least share before we got to Greg's presentation on stress management. So why don't I turn it over to Christy to get us started.
All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Hope you had a great weekend with your families at home, got some rest. You know, I'm glad that Greg's going to talk about stress management because Dr. Moore does a great job of reminding us that we can't pour from an empty cup. So, you know, it used to be that the weekends went by fast and sometimes the weeks were slow, but I think that's kind of changed for us, that the weeks go by fast and then the weekends are a little bit slower and time to calm down. So I'm glad to have that time to rest and recoup on the weekends with my family. So I guess the only thing I wanted to share is on Friday afternoon, I hope everybody was able to join in the call that I had John send out the information on caring for our children. And if you did not get that, I know that he sent that out this morning, but make sure you take a look at that information. I know there's going to be a lot of questions. This is the best practice guidance from the Caring for Our Children. The one thing, you know, there's several things that stood out to me, but one of the top things was that the ratio is, you know, for groups of 10 children, and in that group of 10 children, that if there's a sibling, that the sibling stays with that child. So when we're looking at planning for summer programming or planning for next school year, whenever that might occur, you know, this guidance is going to come in very, very handy. Just a little reminder, if you've not muted yourself, if you could do that, that would sure be awesome. So make sure you check out that. Also, the NHSA call this week, the kitchen table talk, will be on questions and, you know, some planning on how to reopen. So just a little, you know, thought, make plans to schedule your time on, it's either Wednesday or Thursday, John, I forget. I think it's one day this week. Check your email, it just came out. But the kitchen table talk with NHSA will be discussing reopening and what that might look like, and then also what we will need. So check those things out. Let me see if I can open this and I can tell you so I don't confuse everybody. Wednesday, the 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So Wednesday at 2. Also, there's a place for you to put in your questions so that we can have a good open forum on that call. So anywho, hope you're doing well. If you need anything, please reach out. When I first got on here, I'll let John know that I was able to get several of the no contact thermometers, and I purchased those from Cintas, C-I-N-T-A-S. So, you know, those are some of the things we've got to start doing now, is preparing what we need and purchasing items as we can, so that we have those when we're ready. So that's all I've got. If anybody has a question for me, please either message me privately or let me know.
Great, thanks, Christy. Sally, if I could I turn to you? I know that you had sent some information around late last week about 0 to 3, and I saw a couple of responses today. I didn't know if there were any reminders you wanted to share there or any other information coming out of GOEC.
So I'm working on that list for the 0 to 3 training, and just as soon as we get it finalized, I'll let those participants know as well as their director. I received about 30 names, so I'm going to have to weed that list down a little, pare that list down a little bit. So I'll get back with you guys probably either late this afternoon or in the morning as far as who those final participants are. And then as far as information from the GOEC, there has been a new executive director hired. That person will start Friday. And so I think Ed and Workforce will put out an announcement either today or tomorrow And if that doesn't come fairly soon, I'll email everybody. For right now, we're still working on the virtual trainings, and we're also still working on those family learning kits. Probably that will start mid to late week. And what we'll do is send out an announcement to all the Head Start directors as well as some other programs. And we're asking that you guys send that. We'll have a flyer attached with a message. And if you will send that to your families, the kits are limited. So again, first come, first serve, and we have a way to divide those up so that there's kind of a fair allocation of those across the state. And then if families aren't able to receive those because they run out, many of the CECCs will have that same, if not a similar opportunity. So the families will be contacted that don't receive them, will be contacted by the CECCs in their area. So we have a way to, it's kind of a next best scenario. But that email should be coming from me probably mid to late week this week.
Okay. A few updates from KHSA. Jessica continues to work on the conference. We spent a lot of time last week sort of looking at sessions, getting everything set up. Everyone should have received new registration and hotel information for the conference dates in Louisville, September 9th to 11th. If you would visit the KHSA website, you'll see we have an entire conference page that has links to the preliminary agenda, links to all the speakers, links to registration if you have not yet registered, or if you were one of the few programs that requested a refund. We did have a few programs that requested refunds because of the way their fiscal years hit. And so we were able to refund those registration dollars, and then they will need to re-register and pay again. If you or those from your program had already registered and paid for the March dates and you did not request a refund, we have moved your registration and those fees into the new conference. So you won't need to do anything if you've registered already. For the old conference, we will send you new confirmation information for the new dates and everything that you'll need for that. So I would encourage folks, though, if you're looking for hotel, go ahead and jump on there, get part of the KHSA room block, get our conference rate. That's going to save you some funds and will help us meet our obligations. As we continue on with that conference, we'll have more information that's rolling out. But I think right now, Jessica, we've got about anywhere between a half and 2/3 of the program already built out. The people that we already had, we're trying to confirm, and then we're also seeking to add some additional sessions. So you'll have more information as we go through the summer. But just so you know, we do have that registration open. Hotel is open. So if you need to jump on, please go ahead and do that. Let's see, I spoke last week with Christy and Sally on Friday regarding an American Heart Association Voices for Healthy Kids grant opportunities that exist. They've got two new ones out right now. One of them is what they're calling a safety net award, which is up to $200,000 over the next 18 months to really impact policy on early childhood education in your states. The second is a 6-month $50,000 award that they're categorizing as sort of a COVID-19 rapid response. And so we're looking at that rapid response grant almost immediately as to what can the association do, working with Head Start programs, working with GOEC, working with others to deal with these issues of recruitment and what we can be helping programs do in terms of ideas and relationships with school districts. So hopefully we will be able to share more on that with you in the coming couple of weeks. Rhonda, I know that this is, I've talked with you a little bit about your experience working with your school districts, and I know from a community action agency perspective, you've had a lot of success there. So as we spoke on Friday, we wanted to roll you into that conversation. So if you have some time, I'd like to give you a call this afternoon and maybe chat about this a little bit.
Okay, that sounds good.
The class training that I had mentioned, the dates that I had shared originally, the 19th and 20th, those have already filled up. They are going to be sending me a contract for some new dates. I think they're looking at June 8th and 9th, and then there's another one later in that month. So I hope to be able, those of you that had expressed interest in that, hope to be able to get you signed up for that. But apparently what they had initially fell through, and then what they've come along with as a follow-up has filled up too quickly. So there does indeed seem to be some of that demand out there. Let's see, reading my email here. I think that is about it. Christy mentioned the NHSA kitchen table talks that are happening every week. We're also participating in a state association director call each week just to sort of share information. That's where we get a lot of this information about grants and other opportunities that are out there. One thing that we're participating in, I know that I think Christy is participating on a NHSA task force dealing with social media. I'm actually participating with one that has a call right after this one that is dealing with the creation of a state strategy playbook for states, or excuse me, a playbook for state strategy, that is. I've been able to share a little bit of the draft information that we've been working on strategic planning. And I think a lot of the other Head Start associations around the country have looked at that as a model. So I'm kind of proud that KHSA is able to be recognized as a leader and sort of take the lead in that area. So more on that as we go forward, but they're really looking, I think, over the next 3 months to put out some new information on what states can be doing to strengthen not only their associations, but how all of their grantees can be working more closely together. So let me open it up to questions, comments, feedback from those of you that are participating with us on the call. Any great stories that you've got to share from the last week, or any challenges that you're experiencing that others might be able to help you with? Please feel free to go ahead and chime in if that's the case. All right, not hearing any, and of course you can send something around later if you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Greg Coker. As you know, Greg is our government relations consultant and lobbyist with Capital Link Consultants. He joined us last week to have a conversation about leadership in times of adversity, and this week he's going to be talking to us about stress management. So Greg, why don't I go ahead and turn it over to you?
Thanks, John. Thanks, Head Start. Thanks for all that you all do. Today's presentation is on stress management, but it is all under the umbrella of organizational health that I've put together during this COVID-19 unprecedented times that we have. The 5 pillars that I'm working under is individual, team, organization, leadership, and then just general support for the clients that I have, like Head Start. The 3 values that I've pretty much had most of my career, but for sure during this COVID-19 crisis, I have found myself, and I'm sure you all have too, is the 3 R's of re-engaging to Head Start, re-engaging to my community, re-engaging to my spouse, significant other, my community, my church, my society, etc. Reinvention, you know, wanting to be, when I hear those terms of essential employees, I always want to be that essential employee. Well, guess what? If I want to be essential, then I need to make sure I'm reinventing Greg Coker, that continuous improvement on a regular basis. And recommitment, you know, just recommitting to myself as a professional, recommitting to my family, my community, my church, recommitting to Head Start, etc. So let's get into the presentation for today. Is stress management, and the subtitle is Well-Ordered Souls. And I think Aristotle and Plato were the first ones to coin that term. I love that term, well-ordered souls. And the key is everybody on this call are well-ordered souls. You wouldn't be on this call if you weren't well-ordered souls and if you didn't manage stress. My wife is a former nurse. She doesn't practice now, but I remember when she was in nursing school, she came home one day and said they had gone to a mental institution. And as the professor was walking in, he stopped everybody cold in their tracks and turned around and said, let's just get something real clear before we walk in here. There are a lot of differences between the people you'll see today and us, but the major difference is we manage stress, they don't. And that always stuck with me, is that we all have stress. We're all depressed at some form, you know, but we manage our depression, we manage our stress, and we continue. And that's what I think Aristotle and Plato were talking about. Sort of a disclaimer is my workshops, advice, coaching, books, comments, etc., are not a substitute for the medical advice of your physician or your counseling advice that you will see from your therapist or hear from your therapist. I always start my workshops with an action plan, the what, the who, the when. So I'll mention several books today. You'll probably say, you know, that may be the first action plan as it was last week. The what might be by the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, which is an oldie but a goodie. And if you've not read that since college or high school or whatever, you may want to buy that book. It's a great book. The who obviously would be you. The when maybe hopefully as soon as this call is over. But whatever your action plan, your personal action plan or your action plans, if you lead Head Start, which you do, then you might have several action plans. What might be an action plan for you as an individual, as a husband, as a wife, as a significant other? One action plan may be for your immediate team, and one action plan, like for John Mountjoy, might be for the entire association as a whole. So let's talk about the definition of stress. There's tons of definitions out there. I like this one, the rate of wear and tear on the body and mind. We all have wear and tear on my body and on my mind for sure. The more life stress we experience, the greater likelihood we'll eventually get sick. Bottom line. And there's a lot of people out there right now that don't have the coronavirus is because their immune system's good. They've been walking around the block every night. They stopped smoking or whatever they stopped doing, and they probably hadn't got that virus. It's the same thing with the flu or a cold. You know, if our immune system gets down, guess what? We're going to get sick. My dad used to always say, don't go outside, son, with your head wet. Well, that was good advice, but if I was going to get sick, it probably was more for my resistance being down than my head being wet after basketball practice or a shower or whatever. Under stress, our immune system functions less efficiently. Stress and its impact on our health have been studied for a very, very long time. As I mentioned earlier, Aristotle and Plato, but also Shakespeare. He said things are neither good or bad. Thinking about them makes them so. Pretty profound statement. Plato and Aristotle were curious of the characteristics of people like you and me who remain healthy. They coped well with life's adverse circumstances, while other people confronting the apparently similar situations or problems were overwhelmed and even crushed. You know, I've told the story and you all have heard it. I was fired from corporate America. There's lots of people fired from corporate America or fired from how many have been fired before? I mean, that's good for the soul. Well, I know a lot of people that are fired and they're like you and me. They pick themselves up with a bootstrap and they get back getting on. And other people that you probably know, never the same because they made their identity what they did for a living, which is dangerous. Recent studies on stress. I love this one on the phone company because I used to work with a phone company. This was way back in the 60s, I believe. Dr. Hinkle studied AT&T. He was a psychiatrist and he had generally been considered the first one to systematically study healthy persons. Everybody else had been studying sick people. He wanted to find out, you know, let's study the healthy ones. What are they doing to cope and avoid disease? He studied employees at a phone company, AT&T, who called in sick and what the reasons were they were calling in sick, what was their frequency, the time of the week. Not surprisingly, most were calling in sick on Mondays and Fridays. He then studied those who didn't call in sick, the healthy people like you and me. And what did he find out? The more life stress an employee had, the greater likelihood of getting sick. Duh. I mean, we all know that. But he was one of the first ones to realize that, you know, there's a lot of germs out there. And statistically, we should be sick a lot more than we're sick, and we're not. There are multiple risk factors for disease, not just the germ. Those that coped well did so in two basic ways. They took charge of the situation and they had friends who they could rely upon. They were self-initiated, self-directed, and they had a lot of friends and families they could call and rely upon. So as we go through this workshop, you know, you might want to be taking an audit of yourself. You know, do you take charge of the situation? What about the people that you work with? Are you helping them be self-directed? What about your friends? Are you keeping in touch with them? And it takes a lot of effort to keep in touch with those friends, especially now. Dr. Robert White, he was a psychologist. He emphasized the importance of planned, orderly problem solving. And the theme I'm hearing on TV right now with folks that are working from home, which is a lot of us, is you've got to get up, you've got to take a shower, you've got to go into your quote office, unquote, whatever that is, your living room or your bedroom or whatever you're working from, because folks that are stress resistant keep that order in their life. You've probably heard on Facebook, the Navy SEAL general who talks about making the bed. That's the first thing they teach you in boot camp, is you got to make your bed up. What they're basically, and I do work in prisons and halfway houses. In halfway houses, you go into a halfway house. If you've ever been in one, Isaiah House, I work with them in Lebanon, Kentucky, and some of the other ones. You go in there and their bedrooms are everything's tucked in, everything's well ordered, because they realize folks that go through stress need that structure in their life. And I just listed a problem-solving model that you're welcome to use at your home. It's practical. I think we get overwhelmed with problem solving because it seems very analytical, very cerebral, which it is, but it's not. It's logical. What's the goal? If you're sitting with your family around a kitchen table and you're trying to figure out how you can start saving money during this COVID-19 because people are unemployed and losing jobs, you're not doing whatever, well, what's the goal? The goal is to reduce our monthly expenses. What are the barriers? Well, we still got to eat. We've got expenses. We've got that. What are the barriers? What are the alternatives? Well, let's think about some things we could reduce some expenses. Well, there's a couple health clubs we belong to. Maybe we could stop doing that. Well, of course, you can't go to them right now anyway, so you're probably, quitting those anyway. But there's some other things that you can brainstorm. That's the alternatives. Then eventually, after you brainstorm maybe 15 or 20 items, you've got to select the ones you want to pursue. That would be the first S, to select. Then lastly would be the sequencing in which you're going to do them, which leads to the next slide, is that's the action plan. The last S in that GBAS is nothing more than a good old-fashioned action plan. I'm a pretty responsible person, but if my name does not get on an action plan, the chances of me actually implementing are slim to none, and Slim just left the building. So we've got to make sure that we are putting things on an action plan. Creativity, thinking outside the box. On the sheet of paper you have in front of you right now, here's your task. Connect all 9 of these dots with 4 straight lines without lifting your pen or pencil. Again, your task is to connect all 9 dots using just 4 straight lines, or without lifting your pen or pencil, or without retracing any of the lines. The only way you can do that, obviously, is to guess what? Go outside the 9 dots. And that's the creativity part of being creative, is inside the 9 dots. And we've been programmed to do this all of our life. How many parents said, nice job, you colored inside the lines. That's great. But very often the creativity exists outside those 9 dots. So we've got to ask ourselves, what can we do to creativity standpoint, is to encourage our folks, especially during stressful times, is to be creative. You all have all been aware, and you were aware with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You maybe want to dust it off. It's still very, very relevant. At the very bottom, that's the physiological needs of being born, being cared for, changing diapers. Then eventually you start moving a little bit more into protecting your children, that safety part of it, providing a house to live in. Then the love and belonging, having friends, those years in the 8th and 9th grade when the hormones are raging there, the adolescence. And eventually is that self-esteem. I want to feel good about Greg Coker. And then eventually that self-actualization, when we start clicking in life. I'm 55 years old. I don't know if I'm in the self-actualization stage right now, but I can tell you at 55, I'm a lot more closer to that than I was at 35 or 45. I mean, I find myself going to libraries and just reading, or going to a museum, or asking myself, what's the purpose of life? Which would be that book by Viktor Frankl. I'm a lot more of a reader now than I've ever been in my life. Which goes to the next slide, which talks about the book by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. He was a guy who was in a POW prison, or he was a prisoner of war, but he was in the Nazi concentration camp and was there, I think, 5 or 6 years. And what he basically noticed in the premise of his work, Man's Search for Meaning, is that there were certain people in that prison camp that should have died that didn't die. And there were certain people in that prison camp that died that shouldn't have died. What did I say that one? Some died that shouldn't have died. Some didn't die that should have died. I mean, I've got that backwards on that part. But bottom line, what he basically came up with, it was our decisions to choose, to find purpose in life. There will be suffering. It's how we react to that suffering that counts. And there is meaning in suffering, the power of purpose and its impact on survival. The true test of character is what's revealed in how we act. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, I'm sure you're familiar with this also, and that's more with death, but I think it's also with stress and grievance. And I can look at this whole chart right here, right now. When I first found out that this COVID-19, this pandemic was happening, it was denial. There's no way. America, we denied that it was going to be a big deal. Then I get angry. I get real PO'd, that what happened and where it started. And then I start bargaining. I start praying a lot. God, just please help it not affect me or my family. And then you get depressed. And I get depressed every day, a little bit of depression on what's happened to our economy, what's happened to me personally. And then at some point, you start to accept this may be the new normal for a while. Again, folks like you and me reach that acceptance probably a lot faster. The stages of team growth, you've seen this model if you've ever been in a workshop with me. It's called form, storm, norm, perform. Bottom line, the teams you work with all go through these predictable stages. We go through form, we start going to storm, and that's conflict resolution. We get to norm, eventually perform, and transformation. I bet you see your families going through this as you started working at home. You form, everything's sort of nice. What's this going to be like? Mom's going to be in her office, dad's going to be in his office, we're going to do this. You eventually start going through a little bit of conflict. That's healthy as long as you don't attack each other, that you start saying, okay, let's stop. What are we feeling right here? Let's debrief this. Eventually you start to click in your house, and eventually you start performing. You start actually maybe being more productive. Your family starts saying, well, this is what it's going to be like. Maybe we can start walking a little bit more. Maybe we can go drive around Keeneland, do whatever we want to do. And John and I talked a couple of weeks ago where you and your daughter are driving around. You start performing. But guess what happens? This is a fluid model. You'll go back to form whenever there's change. And your folks are going through this right now in your classroom at Head Start. Classes start in form. The kids start storming. That's when the teacher starts developing a lot more structure. He or she gets them to norm, perform. But guess what happens? A new student comes in, boom, you're back down to form again. So under stress, we've got to realize we're going to have predictable stages. A person with a why to live can bear almost any how. Friedrich Nietzsche said that. I talk about Simon Sinek. I talked about that on the first presentation last week. Google Simon Sinek, first start with why, TED Talk. It was like the #2 downloadable TED Talk. What he talks about here is that this is the golden circle. And I talked about this last week. This is profound. What he basically says is most of us start with the what. What do you do? Well, I work for Head Start. Well, that's great, but people are more motivated by the why than they are the what. What do? We change people's lives at a very early age. We set the foundation for success. Well, that's a lot more motivating than I teach a bunch of kids. And I've been guilty of being more what than why. What Simon Sinek says that Martin Luther King, the Wright brothers, they got people to follow them and follow the cause more from the why. Martin Luther King, I have a dream. Not that I have a plan, I have a what, I have a why. The Wright brothers were more motivated on getting men and women to fly commercially than being famous. There was a guy named Langley that was funded by the War Department in the 1900s. They gave him $50,000 in the 1900s. He wasn't the first one to develop commercial flight. You know why? Because he was more motivated by what. And that's the being famous versus the why with the Wright brothers. The how is your policy. What he also does, Simon Sinek, which is brilliant, he says, this is not psychology, this is neurology. He talks about the brain. There are two parts of the brain, the neocortex and the limbic. The neocortex is more logic, it's language. It's more the what. The limbic is more why. That's emotions, that's emotional intelligence, that's blood, sweat, and tears. As you all know more than I do, teaching young people, they're going to be more motivated and engaged to learn if we tap into their limbic versus the logic of this is why you got to go to school. Well, why do you want to go to school? Because guess what? You want to be that person. You want to do this. EQ, in addition to IQ during difficult times, you got to have your IQ. All of you all are smart. You wouldn't be on this call. But what about your emotional intelligence? Our emotions are contagious, resonating energy, enthusiasm, all playing a crucial role in getting us through this pandemic. The converse is true. If we spread negativity, mistrust, Fear, gloom, doom, we're more likely to prolong this pandemic. And that's why I've stopped watching as much news every night, because they're more on the gloom and doom. You got to be practical and understand what's going on. We will excel through not just being smart, our IQ, but how we connect with other people. So what are the 4 components of emotional intelligence? Self-awareness. You've got to be aware as a parent what you're doing well with your kids and where you're not doing so well. You know, I've got to be careful. I've got a short temper. I've got to be aware that if I'm not careful, I get a little bit angry with all this stuff going on and I blow my fuse. I've got to be aware of that. Self-management. I got to manage me. If I feel like I'm getting ready to go crazy and throw stuff, I can go outside or something. You know, I got to go ride the lawnmower. Social awareness. We've got to be aware of the people around us, the cliques. But now more than ever, this 3rd component is very difficult during this pandemic. But guess what? Teachers have invented for the world how to do this. They're driving around neighborhoods to their kids, their students, blowing horns. They're going up. A friend of mine, Ann Margaret Perkins in Harrisburg, Kentucky, was on the Lexington TV station, putting her hand up against a window with one of her students at their home. Brilliant. You guys have helped America with the social awareness during this pandemic. Relationship management. Now is the time to be calling every one of your students. Now is the time to be reaching out to those folks you've not reached out to in a long time. Strive to understand, appreciate, and adapt our general approach to others based on their unique needs and preferences. You know, we all look out of all 4 of these windows of the world. Again, this is one of my signature models called social styles. They're drivers, they're analyticals, they're expressives, they're aimables. Guess what? We're all 4 of them. Our families are all 4 of them. The drivers want to know, bottom line, here's what we got to do this week. That's how they're motivated. Analyticals, here's the 17 things we need to get accomplished this week or today. They're more methodical. They need for you to outline it for them. The expressives need to say, oh my God. Well, let them be expressive. Don't let them go out of control with it, but let them vent a little bit. I'm an expressive. I need to vent to get it over with. Aimables, they're scared. You got to hold their hand, and they will not tell you they're scared. They'll crawl up in a corner if you're not careful. You got to go out there and pull them back out. Aimables need trust. They need, all of them do, but aimables especially. So you've got to customize your approach, not only to your stress levels, but how you manage stress and facilitate stress in your employees. Well, let's talk about stress-resistant people. Dr. Raymond Flannery, and there's a book called Stress-Resistant People. Got on my book right now. Actually, the book is called Becoming Stress Resistant, if you can see it right now. This is actually a friend of mine's book. I ordered it. It's been about 4 weeks, still not here. I borrowed Skip Worth's book. It's a great book. This is the book by Dr. Raymond Flannery, Becoming Stress Resistant. He studied over 1,200 women and men for over 20 years. The basic question he asked, what were their specific skills and general overall strategies for adapting to and coping with stress? Well, so guess what? This is what the book said. Stress resistant people. Number 1, people like you and me who are stress resistant. Not that we don't have stress. We have stress. We manage stress. They take personal control. They're empowered versus overpowered. Their internal control, self-initiated, self-directed problem solving versus external control, waiting on other people. And that was a basic difference. People who are more internally controlled, I got to pick myself out with the bootstrap. I've got to get back out there. I got to take control. I'm that way. You're that way. Other people in our lives are more external control. They wait for other people. Well, guess what? Maybe we can help them by saying, listen, we're going to help you, but you need to take personal control also. And as you're going through these 7 characteristics, this is an audit for us right now. Number 2, they're task involved. They're purpose driven. They need a reason to live, a why, as Simon Sinek says. They need a why. They want to build those cathedrals versus laying brick. And right now, if there's no other reasons to make it through this, we got a bunch of young people out there in Head Start that we need to get back to. So I got to survive for them. And that's exactly what Viktor Frankl wanted. So he wanted to survive because he had a book he wanted to write. And that was what got him through it, is he wanted to get back, write the book on purpose, on me. And that kept him alive. He should have died. He didn't, because he had a why to live, a person with the why to live. Number 3, wise lifestyle choices. Regular physical activity is probably as close to a magic bullet as we will come to in modern medicine. And that is Dr. Joanne Manson with Harvard. Modification in lifestyle could prevent or delay 75% of our illness and disease. The other 25% is genetics, which we have no control of, and the environment, which we have little control of. But guess what's happened with this pandemic? There's less smog. I mean, I would have never wanted this to happen, but you see the skies now in San Francisco and China and other places in Australia. You can actually see the sky now. Number 4, they seek social support. Boredom and chronic loneliness was risk equated to a 1 pack per day smoking habit. So if you're a lonely smoker, you're in deep trouble out there. Again, this is a challenge, but how many of you all have done Zoom calls with happy hour on a Friday and Saturday night? We're starting to be real creative of how we are social without touching each other, and it's going to continue. The Brigham Young did a study on longevity, and this is the slide right here. What they did is they studied all the factors of keeping us alive a long, long time, living to be 90 or 100 years old. At the very bottom, it was environmental, blood pressure, weight, exercise, all very important. But look at the top 2, strong social interaction and close relationships. For folks out there that are rocking themselves to death, and my grandparents did it, they retired early because they could, and they sit on the front porch. They didn't live very long. Other folks, like what we're doing right now, is folks were, if they retire at all, I probably will never be able to retire, but if I do retire, I'm going to stop working. I got to continue speaking and training, and so do you, because guess what? This is going to keep me alive a long time. I've got to keep social. Number 5, a sense of humor. Humor and laughter stimulate our immune system. It lowers our blood pressure. It increases those endorphin levels. It decreases our stress levels. Researchers discovered that on average, toddlers, the little children in your all's classroom, laugh 400 times per day. Adults only 15 times per day. We need to be learning from these young folks. We need to start laughing more, because when I laugh more, the endorphins are released. Number 3, anger triples mortality rates. People that are angry and PO'd at the world, they die faster. And the last one is, what about an idea of a comedy movie night throughout the week? We talked about earlier opening up our swimming pool and hoping there wasn't something floating out there from a little kid right there. And I talked about Caddyshack. What a funny movie. My wife and I watched that a couple of weeks ago. We didn't watch that scene with the Snickers bar or whatever it was, the baby Ruth floating around. That's funny stuff. We need to start laughing, because when I laugh, that's a natural drug that's released, and it's called endorphins. Number 6, religious values. This is not a religious presentation. Dartmouth, Harvard, MIT, a lot of others have studied this. Religious people tend to live longer, period. They live healthier lives. When they're hospitaled, they get out of the hospital quicker. Heart patients, 14 times more likely following surgery to get out of the hospital. Elderly people who are never or rarely attended church had a stroke rate double that of people who attend church. Religious people tend to be depressed less often. Again, not a religious presentation. No matter what your religion is, you've got to be able to get engaged with that religion again. Number 7, and back up. How many of you all, raise your hand, watch a lot more church service online than you ever did before? I mean, yesterday we watched at least 2 services. And on Facebook, people are sending their preachers or live on Wednesday nights. I used to never listen to that. I listen to it all the time now. So religious values is a very, very important trait. Number 7, optimism. Optimism is more of a worldview. Number 5, the sense of humor was more of an emotion. This too shall pass. Our grandparents, how many grandparents said that? After the fire, based on my book, Building Cathedrals, The Power of Purpose, which St. Paul's Cathedral burnt to the ground. But after it burnt to the ground, guess what? The leaders of London, the leaders of Head Start said, let's make this place stronger, better, and faster. Let's rebuild. After the, quote, fire, unquote, most folks report coming out better, stronger, and faster. Guess what? After COVID-19, after this pandemic, we will come out better, stronger, and faster. We'll be more engaged with our families. We'll be more engaged with our gods. We'll be more engaged with our churches, our families, our students. I mean, I think sincerely, and I'm an optimist, we're going to be better, stronger, and faster. Fear got us into this. I think optimism will get us out a lot quicker. And I'm not diminishing what we're going through right now with this virus. What about a growth perspective? You may have seen this on Facebook. I pulled this off Facebook a couple, 3-4 weeks ago. How are you going to react? Are you going to be in that growth zone as a result of all this pandemic? or are you going to be in the fear zone? I started out in the fear zone. You go to the learning zone, but eventually I'm in that growth zone. I'd have never done these webinars. I'd have never produced this material had it not been for the pandemic. So I end the way I started, on your action plan. Review your action plan, take a look at them, and hopefully you'll follow through with them, which I know you will. So let's tie it all together right now. John, thank you for the honor and the privilege for being on the call. I'll open it up for any discussion, questions you might have.
Very good, Greg. Thank you so very much. I know that you've taken time not only to prepare these presentations last week and this week, but to be here with us and to share your thoughts and observations. Are there thoughts, any comments, questions for Greg? I know one of the things that you mentioned at the outset, or maybe about a third of the way in, dealt with the students visiting the mental health facility and saying that, you know, the only difference between you and these folks in here that you can deal with stress easier and better. I had it once described to me, and I thought this was very accurate, that depression is nothing more than someone trying to handle difficult things by themselves for too long. And I thought that was a very good sort of definition of what that is. So anyway, just open it up. If people have thoughts, comments, questions, observations, Greg is here to interact with you. Okay, I'm not hearing any, I'm not seeing any. So Greg, thank you so very much. We will make this recording available to all the participants here, as well as our other Head Start programs. Greg, I'll send you a copy of it as well. Greg, any final thoughts or comments for our group?
You know, thank you all very much. The first one we did last week was on leadership and adversity. This one's on stress management. The third and fourth ones that I've developed, which you all are, if you take a poll of the group, I'm more than honored to share those with you. Number 3 is on gaining traction. What are companies, organizations, associations doing to gain that traction? And that's a metaphor that the book Traction uses. So the next one's called organizational traction. The fourth one is on teamwork. What the successful teams do, what the not so successful, the dysfunctional teams don't do. So I've got those two. We could revert. We could do teams next week and not do the organizational traction. Whatever you want to do or how you want to do it, you all can talk among yourselves, but I've got 2 more if you're interested. And I know what Jim Flynn with the superintendents are doing. We're trying to get professional credit for the folks that go through these. Eli or Elo, it's some certification that educators have, and I can share it with you, whatever. But if you all would want to get credit for it, I'm producing that for Jim Flynn. You might as well, if you do it, you get 4 hours credit for assuming you get certified. I mean, they
all right.
Prove it. We'll be glad to do that.
Hey, John.
Christy, what's it called?
ELA hours.
ELA, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
ELA, right?
Yes, EILA.
Oh, EILA, yep.
John, there's just one thing I remembered I thought I'd share. I posted on Twitter just a second ago, Paducah Head Start, we're doing our second parent committee meeting on, let's see here, on Wednesday evening. And it's a parent cafe. So anybody who wanted to see what a virtual parent cafe looks like, the contact stuff is there. Feel free to jump on, hang out for a little bit. If you don't like it, you can leave. But just thought I'd share that if anybody wanted to check and see what a virtual parent cafe would look like.
Very cool. I'll jump on there and share that link with everybody. Okay, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And if there aren't any other questions or comments, we will go ahead and adjourn for this week. I'll be sending out information this afternoon about next week's call, and we look forward to talking with everybody then.
Thank you.
All right. See you, everybody. Have a great week.